Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to be describing to you the overall process of Cornell Notes. Note that I'm not going to be showing you how Cornell Notes actually work. I'm just going to be going through an overview of how the process works. Our learning intentions for today is we're working to identify features of the overall process and how it works. You guys will be successful if you can explain the overall process. When we use Cornell Notes, it's best to start out with what we call a template. So a template is just a set arrangement for exactly how you're going to take notes and what you're going to write where. The example of the template I'm giving you guys is on the right. So if we look over to that template, if we look over at the top, there's places for your name, class, period, and date. But then below that is this little space for your topic. So the idea when you're using a Cornell Notes template is that each and every time you take Cornell Notes, you're doing things the same way. You're actually establishing a routine for yourself so that as you go through the note-taking process, you're very comfortable with the overall process and you're familiar with and you can easily go through the steps of the process. So when we talk about that, what's in that topic, what needs to go on that topic line, what needs to go up there is basically the main idea of what we're learning about. Next, underneath that is a box for learning intentions. So again, the question for learning intentions that we can think about is, what are you trying to learn? So if we're in class, frequently our teacher will actually give us our learning intentions or write it on the board for us. So then we would actually have that information for us available. It's best to, whenever we're getting information and putting it into our notes, rather than just copying what our teacher has on the board, copying word for word what our teacher tells us, it's best to put it on words. When you put something in your own words, you're better able to remember it, and you're better also able to understand it because it forces you to think about it and put it in a way that you can understand it. Below where it says learning intentions, we have two separate columns in our table. On the left we have the main ideas, and on the right we have details. Notice that there's a lot more room provided for the details section than the main ideas section. The main ideas section is always very brief, and you're just listing topics, headings, things like that. So in the main ideas column, you're going to list the titles of sections, the title of main ideas, and basically just the most important ideas. Then what you're going to do on the right side is whenever you write an idea on the left, you're going to move over to the right and you're going to write some supporting details that would help you to understand that main idea. So what is included in supporting details? In a lot of instances, vocabulary is an important part of main ideas. Overall, main ideas, we would say they're supportive. Details are supportive of main ideas. When we look all the way down to the bottom, we see a box for a summary. The question for that box is, in your own words, what are the main ideas of what you've learned? Essentially, a summary is for when, towards the end of class, when class is wrapping up, when you're done reading a chapter and you're done taking notes. The idea of the summary is that when we are listening to a lecture in class, when we're watching a video, when we're reading a text, whenever we get a lot of ideas presented to us, it's important that we not just think of the ideas as a bunch of random facts and details. Rather, the information we're presented with, it all goes together. All the information fits a central theme, and all the different pieces of information fit together into a whole. So the summary helps us to understand that whole and understand how all the ideas fit together. So when we go through the Cornell process, this is something that we can use in a variety of situations. We could use it when we're reading. We could use it if we're just listening, maybe listening to our teacher, listening, to a video, or if we're watching a video, or watching somebody demonstrate something for us. That's something we could also use this template for. So the overall process that's involved in this template really takes place in 3 separate stages. So before class really gets underway, before you really get into the important details of what you're learning, or before you really get into your chapter, there's a before portion of Cornell Notes. When I say that there's a before portion, what I mean is that really before you get to writing with the main ideas and details, even before you get there, you have to start with the topic box, and you have to start with the learning intentions. So the learning intentions in the topic box force you to think about what the overall lesson or what the overall information you're about to receive is about. The importance of these two steps in the process, filling out the topic, filling out our learning intentions, is that as we go through this next phase, we have an overall understanding of what kinds of information we need to look for. So let's just say, for example, our topic is Canada. So if we're getting information, and we're going to be taking notes down in this section, if we know our topic is Canada, we know that the important information is going to pertain to Canada. Say, for example, if we're getting a lot of information about Asia, for example, we know that that's going to be much less important, and that there's going to be less importance on taking notes than, say, the main important information we receive about Canada. So again, the importance of writing down our topic, writing down our learning intentions, is that as we're receiving additional information, we have a little bit better of a method for sorting that information and putting that information into an orderly fashion down here. So then once we've figured out our learning intentions and our topic, we'll have a good idea of what we're going to be learning and what you need to be paying attention to. So next, then, in our main ideas and details box, we're always going to start with trying to figure out what the main idea of a topic or section is, and then we're going to try to write down either a sentence or some sort of title in this left-hand column. Then we're going to move over to that right-hand column to write something that supports that main idea. So, for example, if you're reading a section in a textbook, you could put the section heading in the main idea section, and then in the details section, you could write what are the important ideas from that section, and what are the important vocabulary, and what's their definition. So essentially, most students, when they take notes, the things that they write down just actually fit into this ideas and details section. However, Cornell Notes helps us to better sort ideas. Again, sorting ideas is an important part of the note-taking process. We shouldn't just be thinking of the information we receive as just being random, said randomly, and presented to us in a random fashion. Rather, everything we should be receiving should be presented in an orderly sequence. By dividing the information into main ideas, we can actually better organize the information and then better understand it, better study it, etc. Then down in the after box, and this is something that helps us to view our lesson, our chapter, a section in our textbook, whatever it is, in a better fashion. So if you can summarize the information you received, that really shows not only that you understand it, but that you can organize the information and see an overall picture or overall idea. For example, when we read textbooks, textbooks are divided according to main ideas. So each chapter, generally in a textbook, is going to be centered around a certain problem, a certain theme, a certain question. Once we understand what that question is, summary becomes much easier. A lot of students complain that Cornell Notes can be a lot of work. While this certainly is true, it does take more time to sit there and think about, what's my topic for today? What's my learning intentions? Okay, now I'm going to take my notes. Now I'm going to figure out how to sort everything out. I'm going to figure out what's the main idea, what's the detail. Most students would rather just write, copy down what they see on the board, copy down what their teacher's saying word for word. However, that approach doesn't really lead to learning in class, or whatever learning takes place in class is very superficial, and a lot of times you're not going to remember it later on. However, with Cornell Notes, it really forces you to think, and by being forced to think, you actually have to learn. So although Cornell Notes may seem like a lot of work, it may be a lot more writing in class, a lot more writing when you read, a lot more thinking. That thinking, that writing, is actually going to pay off in the form of learning. Again, recall that active learners learn more than passive learners. If you're taking Cornell Notes, you're being an active learner. So just to recap what we've learned, Cornell Notes is a better way to remember and establish organization in the way we take notes. It's a good way to establish routine so that we understand the process of note-taking more easily, and that we can go through the same process each and every time. Cornell note-taking involves 3 main stages. Before we start reading, listening, watching, whatever it is, we need to be writing down our topic and what the learning intentions are, what we're trying to be learning when we go through that reading, lecture, whatever it is. Then when we're actually going through the reading, the lecture, the lesson, whatever we're talking about, then we actually have to go through the main portion of our note-taking and figure out what the main idea and details are. When we're all done, we take part in what's called after reading, after listening, after the lesson activity, by writing up a brief summary. Oftentimes students might not have time to write that summary in class, but it would be a good idea to write it once you get home, once you get to study hall, etc. The after reading, after listening process is extremely important in understanding the main ideas you received in as organized a fashion as possible. Thank you for listening.